we are so excited that you have joined us again for another episode of Meet My Mississippi Authors and Artists. We have so many amazing guests today with us each week, and here is another one. I'm going to always let them introduce themselves. So today we have
Angie Camp, and I am from the East Tupelo area.
Okay.
And mother of 5, my oldest now in heaven, grandmother of 3.
Okay.
And they call me Peaches.
And you look fabulous.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So now we're going to go back. I always try to figure out how I met the people that I interview. So we met basically on Facebook like I met everybody else.
Right.
When I first started getting on Facebook and promoting my books and things, I said, oh my goodness, I'm trying to promote Mississippi, so I really want to promote our authors and artists. So I've been doing this way before the show. So I would find out anybody who wrote a book or did book signings, and I'd put them on my page and share them. So that's how we kind of knew each other.
Yeah,
and this is our first time really just meeting.
I know.
And so I've seen your book signings and promoted a lot of your things and the events that you have at different churches and things like that. So now we're going to talk about all of that. Now just tell us where you were born, where you were brought up, kind of how your family life and all that.
Okay. Well, I was actually born in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay.
But only because my dad was stationed in the Air Force. So,
same with me. I tell people, don't hold that against me. I was born in, Illinois, but my dad was in the Air Force.
Right. But I'm a Mississippi girl.
Okay, we got here as soon as we could.
That's
people.
right. That's right. I was 2. So
I was 6 months old.
Right. But I'm a Mississippi girl for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, now tell us about that.
And so I grew up in the Pontotoc and Lee County areas. Went to school the elementary years at North Pontotoc Attendance Center, and then we moved to East Lee County, and I graduated from Warville High School.
Okay.
And so after graduating from there, I just it was not a good experience for me. There was a lot of childhood abuse and things that I went through, and so not a whole lot of good memories then. And so I was married for 21 years, and my husband sadly fell into a slew of addictions and issues, and in the midst of that, trying to mend our family, our oldest son, we had 4 boys, our oldest son was in a tragic wreck in which he received burns that caused him to have a double amputation. So our family ended. God began to use our story, mine connected with my co-authors, and the whole plan all along was a movie, but then God said, write the book, and so we wrote the book, and in the book writing process, the Lord said, you've got to get home. And I'm like, I don't want to go home. It was not, Morville was not a happy place for me as a child. And so, but he said, you've got to get home. I'm going to make you fruitful in the land of your suffering. It's a scripture in Genesis. And so I've been back home for 4 years, and it's been fantabulous. It's been such an amazing thing, the healing that's come, reuniting of friends and building relationships. So God knew what he was doing. He always does.
You can have healing from your past.
Yes.
So this book has been part of your healing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to start with Hell's Bend, a moment from eternity. Now, if you look at the front of the book, most people will say, oh, that's a fiction book and it's going to be adventuresome and all that just from the very front of it, but this is a true life story.
It has a lot of our true life events in it. Now, not all of it.
Exactly. But it's from kind of a true life.
Yes, the main character is based on my son Bryant, who sustained those injuries. We bring his wreck into the story. Little more fictional, adding a person in the wreck with him. Fortunately, he was alone when his happened. And so, but during this process, we lost him. Actually, it was 3 years ago. Just a couple of days ago, we had the 3rd anniversary. But the main character is based on him. His mother in the book, Grace, is a lot of the things that she goes through are things that I actually went through. But we kind of streamlined the characters to fit where more people could identify realistically. And if you can find a character that reminds you of yourself, if you will follow that character through to the end, you will see how we biblically help this person walk out their faith regarding the tragic situations that occur in the story. But we have other people's true life stories in there as well. And how people who are close to us and things that has happened to them tragically and how God has used it and continues to use it and has brought healing for them as well.
Okay, so how do you weave those through the book? You weave their stories throughout this whole story of the main character.
Right.
Is that how you do that?
Yeah, there's a strategic reason to bring these families in as characters in the story because one of them is a healing agent.
Okay.
And I don't want to say too much and give it away, but it's a local personality that people would recognize, and something tragic that happened with their son, this particular family, and God uses their story in my story as a healing agent. There's also a precious friend of mine who is a character, represents him in here in a tragic accident that he had about 13, 14 years ago, and how the Lord, he was miraculously healed. And
so how
his
did
story.
you start writing? Okay, after the events that happened, did you just think, okay, you were saying a movie. How did the movie thought come about first?
A really good friend of mine for over 20 years, Barry Westmoreland, he's the one that, his name's on the book too. He had this idea for a movie years ago, and he had helped with a judgment house at his church. And he just felt like it was a great storyline that would grab people's attention. He saw how effective it was, the people coming through the judgment house. And so he knew that I'd written scripts for different, our pageant ministry at our church at the time where we were. And he said, what do you think about this? And I said, it's a great storyline, but there's not enough there to make a movie. And so one day it's like a light bulb went off, and we realized that our story with Bryant's accident combined with his would make an incredible movie. So we started that process and did not get, back then Christian films were up and coming, but not really strong enough that people felt comfortable investing. And so we put it on the shelf for about 3 years, and then the Lord said, write the book. And so we wrote the book, and God has used that in a lot of ways, but we know that it's coming around to the movie. Now we have completed the screenplay. We've got our budget and breakdown, and so we're just waiting on God's timing and investors. We do have people interested, but we're just waiting on Him to say go. And so when that comes around, we feel like it will be very effective for the kingdom. The different things. Of course, a lot of the book is not in the movie. You hear the part about the movie is much better than the book is much better than the movie. There's a reason for that because you can't put it all in there.
Absolutely.
And this is a pretty long book. But anyway, so we have 3 main threads that remain that we pulled out of the story that we know is the most significant and impacting, and that is, number 1, that there are consequences for our choices. Number 2, that the gospel is true, and it is all throughout. It's very evangelical, and that there is hope even when we make choices that are not good and bring about tragic events, that God still has a plan to use it all for good, like His Word says. And so those are the 3 main threads that you will see in that, which we feel are the most important. And it's very teenager oriented. The main characters are teenagers. And so because of the time we live in, with our young people being so short-sighted, and also a parent, one of the parents, he wants to be his son's friend and not a parent. And so he realizes that had he been what he needed to be, he could have prevented a lot of tragedy. So there's a lot. I mean, it's for everybody. There's a lot of different ages, of course, represented.
Over all ages,
yes,
so we can. Wonderful.
Absolutely. Somebody will glean something from it.
So when did you start writing the book, and when was it published?
The book was initiated the writing process in August of 2014. And then it came out the end of March of 2016.
And what has the reception been for the book? And
it's been great. We've really been amazed. We, locally speaking, of course, because the tragic events of my own personal family were so extreme.
Now, are those interwoven in the book also?
A little bit. A little bit. There's a lot that's not, and it's so funny. My son that we lost, we did some interviews and book signings together before we lost him, and he would tell people we had to fictionalize it because nobody would believe our real story because it really was so extreme. And so it was one of those situations where you thought it couldn't get any worse, and then it would.
Right.
Because through our tragedy, my husband passed away. We lost everything. You know, Bryant's tragic accident, and so it has been a very long 12 years. Still recovering
from it. It can help a lot of people, because you think other people out there thinking, my life is the worst of the worst of the worst. It cannot get any worse. But what we know is that as people, we are more alike than we are different. And we all go through a lot of things. And a lot of people are scared or are embarrassed to say, I'm hurting. Or I'm going through some things. So you're opening it up to say, okay, this is life.
Yeah, transparency is so important.
Isn't it? It really is.
Because that is when people will let their walls down.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you one of the, you know, as we sit here, as I'm white and you're African American, one of my favorite parts in this book is the relationship between the nurse, Nurse Vale, and Jake, the main character. Nurse Vale is based on a precious friend of mine, Laverne Vance. We go to church together. She's African American, hilarious. We just love her. She's just incredible. And so I love the relationship that you see develop between this black woman and this white boy, and how vitally important she is in his life and what he draws from her. And because that's my heart too, is I believe in racial reconciliation. I believe that we are created equal in God's eyes. Our cultures are different. We have so much to learn from one another and draw from one another. And so, and in fact, our church is interracial, interdenominational. And so that's what God's heart desire is that we would be unified.
So I would see on Facebook a lot your son, and you would do some workshops and things together. What did he feel about telling his story and you writing it in the book? What were his feelings about it?
Well, he ate it up. He loved it. Bryant was very forthcoming about because
everything.
His accident happened because he snuck out of the house.
Right.
And he was joyriding. He had been dared. You know, he wouldn't do it. Of course, he didn't need any help. He was a ham. But he and I tell people this too. There were no drugs. There was no alcohol involved in this accident. And I tell kids, it does not require drugs or alcohol to be rebellious. All it takes is a bad attitude or an act of disobedience. And I had the chance to sit down with him. We thought he was sneaking out. And I had the chance to say, look, if you're sneaking out, you're taking yourself out from under the umbrella of protection that God has for you. And you're fair game for the enemy. So you need to stop. And so, of course, he denied it. And then a couple of weeks later, the accident that would cause his burns and amputations happened. But he was very transparent, even would make fun of himself, you know, his stupid choices, you know. But he knew he was responsible. He always took responsibility. But because the burns were so severe, he would have to be on pain management, and that did lead for him to an addiction. As they took him off of his medication, he began to have to deal with more and more of the reality that had happened. And he felt so much guilt, like so much of it was his fault. And so he went into his own addiction issues. But he went through our facility, Transformation Ranch for Men, faith-based under the umbrella of our church, was actually birthed out of our pain of what my pastor walked through with my husband. He was his best friend at the time, and went through the program, did fantastic. Stayed on as a counselor for 7 months, and but then left the ranch, was going back to school, and had a precious little girlfriend, Lexi, and life was turning around. I mean, we were seeing, we thought we were in the harvest time, you know, everything had turned around, but just in a momentary lapse of discouragement and the lies of the enemy returning, taking him backwards instead of forwards, he decided to get high. He was huffing. And it took his life, and so we mourn losing him, but we
was
see
how old at the time
he was 25. He was 25.
And how old was he in the time of the accident?
He was 16.
Okay, 16.
Yeah. So the last 10 years of his life, he was a double amputee. And but God's still using it all for good. Lexi, his little girlfriend, she just graduated from Liberty University in May, and so we're partnered together with my ministry, More Than Restored Ministries. We're a counseling service, and we're
now say that again.
More Than Restored Ministries.
Okay, and tell the people how they can get in touch with you and with that, and what you offer.
Okay, Well, I have my own Facebook page for More Than Restorative Ministries, and you can contact me through there, leave a message. I do individual counseling for women and girls only, but we are looking at implementing whole family therapy counseling in the ministries of our church at the Anchor, which is now located in Verona.
Okay, and how do they get involved in it? How much does it cost? Is it a pay scale, or how do they?
We are faith-based, and so we do donations. We do have a suggested $25 minimum donation, but we never let that stop people from coming to get help. So. And
about how many people have gone through the program, or have you seen, or you see?
Well, now looking at the facilities at our church, Transformation Ranch for Men and Transformation Home for Women, I'm not sure what the ratio is, because we do have a month care outside of the program, the fourth phase, but we have a lot of people who stay and stay plugged in with the ministries. You have some who fall back into it. They'll come back a second time to get treatment. Sometimes they don't make it. Sometimes we've lost, I think, 8 who have passed away.
And you're basically treating what? Depression?
It's alcohol addiction, drug addiction, and some just different life issues. But along, a lot of it, along with it comes issues with anxiety and depression and different things. And so we just the main thing is that we get them clean, and we put a lot of Jesus in them, because He is the answer. His Word is what sets us free, and so a lot of people plug into their lives, and we have a prayer ministry, for those people as well.
So tell us where you can find this book, Hell's Bend. Tell us where to find it, like your website. Tell them your website, all that.
So you can actually get it locally in Tupelo at Barnes & Noble. They keep it stocked there pretty much. A lot of Barnes & Nobles in the South have them on their shelves, but you can order it from Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com or Zulon Press, who is our publisher, or the trunk of my car, whichever one you want.
Absolutely, and every author will tell you, hey, ask me and I'll have a copy for you.
Yes, or if you make it to one of my speaking engagements, I always have a product table set up.
And if someone wants to get you to speak, what are your speaking topics that you use, that they might say, oh, well, she said she does that, so I'll call her? So what are your speaking topics again, basically?
I don't have anything in particular. The gift in what I've gone through tragically is that the Lord has enlarged the borders. He's enlarged the borders of my ministry. But I talk on anything. If a church, like I say, women's conference has a certain theme, I will fit what I'm saying into that and draw the parts of my story out that apply.
And you have so many parts that apply, because going back to the things that happened to you as a child, I mean, when did that start? The abuse and all that, when did that start?
That my memory will allow me to recall would have been age 6. With the more invasive abuse around age 9 until I was 15.
And so this lets people know that this happens all the time. There is no certain type of person or anything, and not to be ashamed. It's not your fault that you've been abused mentally, physically, emotionally, sexually, whatever it is. I worked in the mental health field in Memphis for like 18 years, and I would say half of the women who came in had been abused in some kind of way. And so you have to be able to have an outlet for that and tell people about it, and then say, oh, I can heal from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with me. It wasn't my fault.
Yeah, absolutely. And most of the women that come to our facility for drugs and alcohol, people aren't on drugs. They're not in addiction. Something happened. Like nobody raises their hand in 3rd grade and says, I want to be a drug addict when I grow up. Something happened. And 9 times out of 10, I would say, that person has been sexually abused.
Absolutely.
At a minimum.
And it's amazing to me, because I would always ask my clients, what happened to you? When did this start? And they would always have this story of my uncle, my stepdad, my this, my that. And I was like, wow. And I'm talking about half of them, 1 out of every 2. And I'm talking about 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, those kind of things. So you have to be able, here's a person who's had some experience, and she has a place that may be able to help you if you want to talk
Right.
about
Or even
that kind of-
individual counseling.
Absolutely.
And you know, a lot of mental issues do come out of that. You know,
They
the
do.
disassociation,
Absolutely.
multiple personality
Personalities.
disorders. A lot of those happen because of
Absolutely.
that. But God can heal anything. I'm living proof of
God
that.
can
He
heal
brought
anything.
me to complete healing. Even a precious testimony with my abuser before he passed away. Once I truly forgave, because forgiveness, I think, is the key to any healing. And a lot of people aren't willing to forgive.
Absolutely.
And unforgiveness becomes a barrier between us and our healing. And so I remember exactly where I was the day that I chose to lay that down and forgive him. And my heart changed, and I began to just pray for God to give us a divine appointment before he passed away, that I could make sure he knew that I had that I'd forgiven him, and he was a family member, so I had to see him. You know, I had to see him at different events, and so God gave me that divine appointment a few years ago. And in talking to him, I remember saying, you know, I was not expecting to get an apology, but in his own way, he was trying to apologize, and I recognized it, and I said, I hope you know I forgave you a long time ago, because a number of years had passed.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, oh, I know that you did. And people don't understand that. There's this meme that comes across social media sometimes about forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. It's for everybody in your environment.
Absolutely.
It is for them.
It is.
Because they need to know the power of forgiveness. And it is for you that you can heal.
Absolutely.
But it's for everybody in your environment.
Around you.
Because it affects,
Because it affects
your
everybody.
attitude. Yeah.
It affects
and
everyone
when
around.
people don't know what's happened to you, you're hurting your testimony, because they don't know what's buried down deep inside of you. They only see what's manifesting.
Absolutely.
And so it can hurt your testimony. And so for people to know that, it makes an incredible difference, because even people in the church would lie and tell you, well, God doesn't expect you to forgive something that horrific. He does. He makes no concessions in his word when he commands us to forgive so that we can be forgiven. But the thing is the reason why he makes no stipulations is because it is possible with him. It is possible with him.
Absolutely.
So I'm thankful that I have that testimony, because
And you
it is
do
so
have a
prevalent.
powerful testimony, and you are a beautiful person inside and
Oh,
out.
well, thank you.
And
So
thank
are
you so
you.
much for coming to be
I
with us
enjoyed
today
it.
on Meet My Mississippi Authors and Artists. And please tune in every week. You don't know what you're going to miss and who you're going to miss on the Hill Country Network. Thank you for, again, Patricia Neely-Dorsey.
It's inside me, girl, it's in the air. It's who I am through and through. It won't take long till it gets to you. It's everywhere. Mississippi magic is sweet molasses breeze. God, country, family, that's what it means to me. Mockingbirds and bars.